Now, I'm going to tell you about the people you really need to pay attention to. The people who travel around mainstream legacy media platforms quietly spreading red pill ideology. These people are dangerous because they can hide in plain sight. Their misogyny is less obvious, but they're just as dangerous, if not more dangerous, because they sound nicer. They don't use the same harsh, sexist language. They might have a more soothing voice or an accent. Americans love a foreign accent. They have respected credentials like advanced degrees or an impressive resume. I cannot stress enough how concerned I am about these folks. Now brace yourselves. These people may be frequent guests or even hosts of a popular podcast that you maybe listened to on your way to work this morning or while you were at the gym the other day. Hate to burst anyone's bubble, but we need to talk about Joe Rogan. I can sum up the Joe Rogan experience in one phrase. I'm not sexist, but he loves pretending he's just asking questions. But the questions always point in the same direction. Suspicion of women, hostility towards feminism, and blind allegiance to traditional masculinity. Rogan might not call himself red pill, but he platforms it constantly. He invites the Manosphere's greatest hits onto his show on a regular basis. Peterson, Tate, Andrew Tate sympathizers, anti-feminist talking heads, and gives them hours of uncritical airtime to push their tired ideology that men are oppressed, masculinity is under attack, and women are either irrational, hypergamous gold diggers, or feminist killjoys ruining society. I think that second one is me. I think I'm the feminist killjoy. Yeah. I should put that on a t-shirt. And Joe doesn't just host these guys, he validates them. He nods along and he laughs at the misogyny. He gives it oxygen because at the core, he believes the same things. He just delivers them with a chill vibe. Rogan consistently downplays the impact of patriarchy and dismisses systemic injustice as a whiny overreaction. He treats feminism like a nuisance, and women's rights are just a joke to him. When he talks about masculinity, it's always from a place of paranoia. Men are losing power. Men are being disrespected. Men need to reclaim their dominance. Masculinity is under attack. Sound familiar? And let's talk about the platform. He has one of the biggest microphones in the world, maybe the biggest. 19.4 million subscribers on YouTube, 19.7 million on Instagram, 15 million on X. And I believe he signed something like a $30 million podcast deal with Spotify. And he uses this platform to amplify the same ideology that radicalizes boys, normalizes sexism, and turns casual listeners into conspiracy-laced misogynists. His podcast doesn't exist in a vacuum. It lives in the same information pipeline that leads young men from Manosphere curious to full-blown Manosphere disciple.
You've never been divorced, right? I have. You know, as soon as you enter it, you see right away that the whole thing is stacked against us.
I mean, believe you.
You have to basically...
I know many friends that have been
I went
divorced.
through the mildest divorce. I mean, my ex-wife was as easy on me as you could be. But nonetheless, I ended up paying a lot more child support than she really deserved. Yeah, you go into these courtrooms, and it's basically down to a judge.
I have a friend who has to pay alimony for the rest of his life.
Yeah.
He was married for 12 years. He's been divorced for 14. He still has to pay his ex-wife. He's married to a new woman. He has a new family. He didn't even have kids with this woman. He has to pay her forever. Yeah, forever.
Imagine if
till she dies.
Imagine if they had kids.
He fucked her so hard she can't work anymore. Forever. But that's a very sexist law, by the way, because that law is implying that this woman is incapable of making it on her own.
Thank you. By definition, it's anti-feminist.
Yeah. Yes.
It's anti-feminist, and it's sexist, and it's patriarchal.
Right.
It is totally patriarchal.
Women who support it, they're supporting it because they don't like men.
That's a great bit of gaslighting. Let's break that down. Notice how the guest said, I ended up having to pay her more child support than she deserves. Child support isn't about the ex-wife, it's about the kids. Why is he talking about what she deserves? Child support isn't taking care of a woman, it's paying her back for your share of the expenses for that child. That's money she's already spent. And it's not for her, it's for your children.
What do you think about masculinity in the modern world? This is something I've been thinking about a lot recently. I got young guys that follow the show and sort of ask a lot of questions to do with that. Obviously, we were talking earlier on about the fact that it's a strange time at the moment culturally for men and women, especially with how criticized it is of what a man and a woman means.
Yeah.
But in terms of masculinity at the moment, it feels like there isn't a very firm place very much for men to stand on. You know, a lot of the traditional roles that they would have had have kind of gone away. Patriarchal superstructure was something that was bad, and then lumped in with that was masculine values as well. And that's kind of been thrown out. I mean, do you think that this is something that's going to swing back around?
It depends on the circles you hang out in. And, I mean, masculinity, it's always going to be something that women are attracted to. This is why it's bullshit. Like, what women say they want in a mate versus what they actually want in a mate, what they want is Jason Momoa. That's what they want. They want a masculine man who's also a nice guy. They don't want is all the shitty things that go along with it, you know? They don't want misogyny. They don't want abuse. They don't want all those awful things that come with it. They don't want people that have a genuine disdain for women. But traditionally, masculinity was always like having a respect for women, having a respect for your mother, having a respect, being a protector and a provider.
Yes.
That has kind of gone away in the eyes of a lot of people, unfortunately. That those positive aspects of what we consider to be masculine characteristics, those positive aspects are no longer considered when you're throwing out the baby with the bathwater.
Correct. That's exactly what I would have said.
This is the root of the issue with feminism that is current feminism. Its current incarnation. I am a feminist, by the way.
How dare you?
We can define that.
Leave now, sir.
This is the appalling irony at the heart of contemporary feminism as practiced by self-defined feminists. Okay, many, not all. Guys, I'm not saying all feminists are like this, but I'd say certainly it's the dominant strain right now, which is that it is at its heart patriarchal, which it treats women as vulnerable, weak, powerless, incapable of making their own way in this world. And it treats men as forget about the men. Forget about how they treat men. It's how they treat women that's sexist. It says that they need protection from the state, which is run by usually men. But it's also this other institution, or, college presidents need to protect these women from 19-year-old boys who want to have sex with them. Same thing. Yeah. They're constantly calling for women to be protected by these institutions, the state, by men. It is patriarchal and sexist, right at the heart of it. And same thing with family court. and divorce law and all that stuff. That's how they get treated. They get treated like they're the ones who need to be taken care of by a man. It's like 1950s sexism. It's like Mad Men sexism. That's what most feminists are calling for now. The people who end up in the White House, Obama's staff in HHS, Health and Human Services, and the Department of Education became very clear to me that all these sexual assault laws and rules that came out of there, they were coming right out of colleges, and they were really of that. They were of the sort of college feminist movement. They were the ones who set that letter in 2011 that made it basically mandatory for colleges to set up these kangaroo courts for sexual assault cases. All the nonsense you and I talked about here a couple of years ago. Yeah.
Anybody interested, review those earlier podcasts about your college, about Occidental.
Well, yeah, there's many colleges.
Yeah, but
and, there's a whole backlash now, right? It's all turning back, and I knew it was going to happen.
Right.
Now they're completely being decimated. There's hundreds or maybe even thousands of men who are suing in court, and many of them are winning right now for good reason, because there was no due process.
Right.
Because they weren't allowed to, ask questions.
Well,
all the John Does out there, all those men who were accused and expelled and had their names ruined and their careers ruined,
right?
College careers destroyed and all that stuff, right? I think, but yes, your point.
And also, even if you're exonerated, the emotional turmoil that you go through, there's no way they can reward you for that, or compensate you for that, rather.
So that is part of that whole thing, as I said before, is part of this sort of ironic feminist patriarchy ideology, right? Which is, we need protection. We can't we can't say no to men. We can't stop them by saying no. We need, we need help just there. We need the college president to save us, or the cops, or someone. It's incredible.
Women, you can't just say no to men? No, we can't. Because they don't care. The men we're talking about don't respect consent. So no, Joe Rogan isn't just a podcast host. He's not harmless. We need to stop acting like he's neutral, because he's not. We also need to talk about Stephen Bartlett. I know, y'all, I know. Host of the beloved Diary of a CEO podcast. Bartlett is a British entrepreneur and investor. His YouTube channel has more than 10 million subscribers. Now, my issue with him isn't really about anything he says. It's about who he platforms. The men I'm about to discuss have all been guests on his podcast, and he never challenges their views. He just gives them an even bigger megaphone. I talked about Chris when I was a guest on the F the Nice Guy podcast back in 2024. In trying to avoid the obviously horrible folks like Tate, we can sometimes mistakenly place our trust in those that sound reasonable, not realizing that they are no different. Williamson is host of the Modern Wisdom podcast with over 3.5 million subscribers. He admits to having some conservative values, but doesn't like to politically label himself. Now, he swears he is not a red pillar, yet on his podcast, he said,
I think modern feminism told women that true freedom was achieved by working like your father and having sex like your brother.
And this.
Through their own competence hierarchy in education and employment, they further shorten down the potential pool of eligible men that are as educated or more educated and as employed or more employed than they are. What this causes is a very large group of men toward the bottom of this distribution to be essentially invisible to women. It causes a very large number of women, an increasing cohort, to compete for an increasingly small group of turbocharged super performers at the top. These guys, the super high value guys, have a wealth of options, so they are commitment averse. Why would they decide to sit down with one girl for the rest of time when they have this wealth of options, which can cause them to use and discard many of these women, which then causes most of these women to resent men overall. And then the guys that were forgotten at the bottom that say, well, hang on a second, I didn't use and discard you. I haven't even been seen by you. Both sides of the aisle, both men and women, are retreating from relationships and finding ways that they can justify this. Boss bitch culture and sort of the lean-in women's mentality, or men going their own way, and incel culture and the black pill for guys are both ways that each sex is trying to deal with the challenges that are coming out of the mating market.
Okay, that was a lot. Let's unpack some of that. In that short clip, he made no less than 3 standard red pill arguments. Hypergamy, men at the bottom of the distribution are being ignored because these high-value guys have so many options. They treat women terribly, cheat on them, etc. So when your partner cheats on you, ladies, it's your fault. Your standards are too high. Men would treat women better if they didn't have so many options to choose from. Because these high-value guys have so many options, they treat women terribly, cheat on them, etc. So when your partner cheats on you, ladies, it's your fault. You're too easy, you're too available. Men would treat women better if they didn't have so many options to choose from. Women who are not in relationships justify it by participating in boss bitch lean in culture. That's how women deal with the challenges presented by the mating market, and men join the manosphere. This guy is comparing boss bitch culture to the virulent online misogyny that encourages men to go on shooting rampages and murder women. You see the problem with this, right?
Quick context. Boss bitch edition.
This is a good time to jump in and explain boss bitch feminism. This term refers to something very specific, but I guarantee you that most of the men who use that phrase online don't actually know what it means. Boss bitch feminism sells the idea that liberation is about leaning in, about hustling harder, and building a personal brand, usually on the backs of other women's labor, Black, brown, and indigenous women to be exact. It frames liberation as a solo project rather than a collective struggle, and reduces empowerment to how well you can perform within a broken patriarchal capitalist system. But if men who talk about feminism online actually knew anything about feminism, they would know that this isn't feminism. It's capitalism in disguise. What some refer to as pink capitalism. Boss bitch culture values domination over solidarity, profit over justice, and personal achievement over systemic change. It doesn't challenge power. It just teaches women how to survive it, one LinkedIn post at a time.
Now back to our regularly scheduled programming, already in progress.
But back to Chris. His comments on feminism are comically reductive, which makes sense given that Chris, like the rest of the manosphere, has no idea what feminism is and regularly demonstrates a limited knowledge of history, sociology, and politics as well. Because he's a former reality show star and nightclub promoter. That's his background, and I'm sure he was very good at that. But that's all he did before becoming a podcaster. You're just repeating red pill talking points. He doesn't have any original thoughts of his own, and all he reads is these nonfiction bro books. By the way, I heard someone talk about once how it's easy to tell if the man you're dating is a misogynist based on what type of nonfiction trash he reads.
Hello, my name is Will Thames, and when I lived in New York, I had the pleasure of working as a bookseller at the flagship Barnes & Noble, and I have some findings to report from the field. These are books that if I go home to a guy's place and I see a few too many of these titles on the bookshelf, I'm walking the other way, I'm having some doubts, and I'm checking my expectations, and I want to share this knowledge with you to hopefully spare you from emotionally unavailable man babies. Here we go. And just to set the mood, we just got to jump in with my favorite John Waters quote: if you go home with somebody and they don't have books, don't do it. Don't do it. Be better. And starting off strong with our first red flag book, this is a Mac Daddy title in the fuckboy manosphere circles. This is like the prettiest girl at the prom that these men will bend over backwards for in the hope that she will maybe fart in their direction. It is Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. Now, I'm not running the other way if I just see this book, because on its face, Stoicism's a good thing, actually. I agree with a lot of what Stoicism has to say about let's live life with 2 feet on the ground, let's relate to the world as it is, let's think things through thoroughly. The thing that you need to ask, though, if you see that your man has this book, you need to check to make sure what kind of stoicism are we really into here. Because if we're going by the book, that's fine. That's fine. If you're just taking the text as is, that's not a red flag to me. What is a red flag is you need to make sure he didn't just get this because someone like Joe Rogan, Jordan Peterson, or Elon told him to. If that's the case, you are not about to have your emotional needs met, and you need to walk the other way. Next on the chopping block, we have Atomic Habits by James Clear. Again, this is not an inherently bad book to have on its own, but when coupled with too many of these other titles, it's giving lack of imagination. It's giving, where's the fun? Where's the whimsy? Are we going to talk about nothing but crypto and investment banking the whole time? Or do you have it in you to laugh a little? Are you taking yourself a little too seriously? So this isn't meant to be a total takedown of the self-help genre, but most of self-help is so fucking annoying it makes me want to gag. This, however, this on its own, I'm running the other way. We got Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki, I sold so many of these books to guys who were buying them with Meditations and with Atomic Habits, thinking not much of it, and then come to find out when I look into what the content of this book is, here's what it is. This guy had a biological father and then a stepfather step into his life at a later time. Biological father was an artistic type who never really made a bunch of money, and stepfather was this rich, super type A bankery dude, and the entire moral of the story is, fuck that poor dad. Fuck that bitch. How dare you not make money? If you see this on a shelf, we are going to turn around and we are going to run in the other direction, because this man reading this book is bad at sex, I promise you. Next up, we got The 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss, or really any Tim Ferriss book. Similar to my problem with the Atomic Habits thing, this on its own is not a bad thing. I actually think a man who's taking initiative and wanting to improve himself is a really, really good thing. The problem with this, though, is that 90% of the guys reading this and ingesting this are just kind of looking for a way to make Bitcoin the only source of income that matters. So I don't think you're going to get a lot of good conversation from this guy. I don't think you're going to get a lot of banter, and I don't think he's going to make you laugh or meet your emotional needs at all. So Power by Robert Greene, or really anything by Robert Greene, I have a feeling this should go without saying, but like, no, if you see any number of these on the shelf, we're going to treat this hookup like a SEAL Team 6 operation, and we're going to be in and out. It's not worth the time. You can do better for yourself, I promise.
There was a Bloomberg article in 2022 about single child-free women where they profiled a woman in Manhattan who had a successful corporate career. She had purchased an apartment in Greenwich Village, expensive, and she bought a beach house with her sister, and she likes to travel with close friends. And these were Chris's comments.
A growing number of women are choosing not to have kids, and as a result are advancing in their careers and using their wealth to buy property and travel more. This is an article by Bloomberg, I think, came out of their Business Week edition. Ashley Marraro isn't married and doesn't have kids, and she has a message for women just like her. You can still have it all. I love my life and feel very fulfilled, says Marraro, who froze her eggs in 2018 to keep her options open. The 43-year-old feels a deep sense of satisfaction from her job as a sales representative for a maker of medical devices, which brings her into contact with patients, and she relishes all of the lifestyle and financial freedoms that come with being a single child-free woman in a well-paying job. Marraro, who was married for 4 years before getting divorced in 2008, enjoys an enviable degree of financial independence. The West Village resident owns her own apartment, she bought in 2019 for around $900,000, and then renovated. And in June, she closed on a summer home in New Jersey's Long Beach Island with her sister Christina, who's a few years older and also single with no kids. Ashley figures she's taken 10 trips in the last 12 months and often friends with a large group of about 25 people who are largely unmarried and don't have children. Those trips at 43 sound like they suck. I do not want to go on that trip, frankly.
Fuck you. You weren't invited.
Everything you just described there is kind of like a symptom of what I would call the wider mating crisis. And it seems to be like a cultural kind of prioritizing of the male default of economic success. The kind of girl boss, lean in kind of culture seems to be set up as what the vision for success for women tends to be.
Calling economic success the male default, I have a problem with that, because it's further participating in the othering of women. If you've read Simone de Beauvoir, her book, The Second Sex, she talks about how women are always the other. It's almost like women are considered defective men. In fact, I think some of the ancient Greeks actually thought that. They actually thought that women were just defective men, and assigning certain traits as masculine and certain traits as feminine. So money and success, power, those things are masculine. All the stuff that's associated with zero power, that's all the feminine stuff. I promise I wasn't planning on making a habit of popping in every few minutes, but I just, while I've been editing, things are coming to my mind.
And you had a lot of even corporate giants kind of getting in on this. A few years ago, you had Morgan Stanley, the investment bankers, put out a report that forecasts that 45% of prime working age women between the ages of 25 and 44 will be single and childless by 2030, the largest share in history.
The Manosphere panicked so hard over this statistic. The Manosphere does not like anything that resembles autonomy, particularly bodily autonomy, economic independence, and financial autonomy. Both those things mean less access to women for men. And the guy who's getting a PhD in incel, seriously, he's getting a PhD in incels. I don't know why big of a fuck what he thinks either, because it's not a crisis. Women not wanting to fuck you, not a crisis. Women not wanting to marry you, not a crisis. Anyway, moving on.
And it's not entirely obvious to me that this is in women's best interest. I mean,
no one asked you. Women did not ask for your permission or opinion on what's good for us. How about you let women tell you what's good for women, and then you shut the fuck up.
I'm pretty libertarian in my sensibilities about, freedom of choice, whatever someone wants to do with their life. But it seems to me like you can see the kind of corporate interest in opening up more worker drones for 60-hour work weeks. The workplace now, women are crushing it. It's a brain-based economy rather than a brawn-based economy. So that seems to be in their interests. And it's weird. It's almost like Huxleyan. It's like Brave New World. Have you read that, Chris?
Yes.
Yeah, so it's very Huxleyan. It's like this kind of hedonistic life of going on lots of trips, having very atomized type of sex. Singlehood will be on the rise. You won't get attached to any one person. You'll own nothing and you'll be happy. That kind of thing. And it seems a little bit dystopian to me to kind of, to hurtle towards that dystopian vision.
The smirk on this asshole's face. They wonder why we don't want anything to do with them. Because this is how they feel about us, and then millions of them watch this guy, and it determines how they feel about us. These men hate women. That's what that smirk is. I don't like women. I don't take women seriously.
But that's the modern mating crisis we find ourselves in, and that's where we are.
Why do you think this male default has come about? Because it's something that I've noticed as well. The typically masculine traits are the ones that would have been held by men. The conscientiousness, the disagreeability, the casual sex, the ability to move on and not really catch feels and not be emotional, to focus on possessions and drive fast cars. What is it that's causing that to be imbibed by women and also pushed to them by culture?
Now that question wasn't loaded at all. And again, the idea that there are certain traits that are masculine, like making money, and certain traits that are feminine, sex without catching the article mentioned none of this. None of this. It didn't talk about materialism. It didn't talk about fast cars. It didn't talk about cheap casual sex. It didn't talk about any of those things. All the Bloomberg article said, and I read it, was there's going to be a lot more single ladies in the future. Here's one single lady right now. Hey, single lady, what's going on with you? Well, I have a great job. I love my sister. We bought a beach house. I got an apartment of my own. I like to vacation with my friends. That is literally all the article said. That's all.
So actually, women are generally a bit more conscientious than men. But yeah, I agree with you that it's kind of flipping to that default. And I think it is just an organic backlash to kind of what we might describe as the historic oppression of women socioeconomically. It's kind of a leaning into that freedom almost at too fast a pace.
Once again, nobody asked you your opinion on what women are doing with their lives. Nobody asked. Literally no one asked.
It's like one speed, go, foot to the floor on girl boss mode. And you have the corporate giants kind of playing into that. And it's just a kind of a situation where for the first time maybe in history, men and women aren't relying on each other as obviously as in the past. That it's kind of more individualistic kind of world now. We're kind of atomized and away from our kin in big cities across the world, which is very evolutionarily novel. I think it's just an ordinary, somewhat expected backlash to maybe the oppression of the past.
Like the child of the Christian parents that moves out and immediately gets a nose piercing and a bunch of tattoos and swings back the other way. Okay.
Being single isn't the same as being individualistic. And did he just compare women to rebellious children?
Like the child of the Christian parents that moves out and immediately gets a nose piercing and a bunch of tattoos.
Yep. He compared grown women to children. And that woman said nothing about loveless sex in that interview. The man he's talking to is named William Costello. He's a PhD candidate at the University of Texas. His area of study is individual differences and evolutionary psychology, particularly the psychology of incels.
Some women opting not to have kids are enjoying an enviable degree of financial freedom. She's got all of her different houses. The childless life does have its drawbacks. People who are single and child-free pay more in taxes. And housing is a lot harder to afford on one income than two, especially with home prices and rents at record high and mortgage rates on the rise. So that's the problem that Bloomberg can find with potentially going to your grave with no one else that's part of your genetic kin there to see you.
Yeah, women don't really care about that stuff. The reproductive anxiety that we have has to do with how we're judged for not becoming mothers. People are so bioessentialist that you're seen as not a real or not a whole woman if you haven't pushed a baby out of your vagina. Were it not for that social pressure and all that judgment, remove that, we don't give a shit about any of this stuff. We don't obsess about legacy in the way that men do, because historically, those children never belonged to us. For most of human history, we had no legal right to our children. We couldn't give our children our name. Our husband owned both us and our children. So leaving the world, with no genetic kin, bro, what? Who cares? As a middle-aged single professional woman, this has never come up at brunch. The people who are steadfastly single, never had an interest in kids, we don't care. We don't care what happens after we die because we'll be dead. And we understand that we are full human beings and our purpose on this earth is more than just being broodmares for your comfort, for the state, and for capitalism. We literally don't give a shit.
The fact that you're going to pay more in taxes and housing is more difficult to afford.
Yeah, it's very corporate kind of language, isn't it? That the main concern would be, how do we get around that one stumbling block of the taxes? But I was glad that she did at least highlight the idea of buying a house on a single income, because that's something I always highlight for incels, that's a double whammy kind of circular punishment. It's hard to get a house if you're a single man on one income, and a lot of incels are on lower income or no income at all. You almost need to be part of a dual earning household to get a mortgage. So without the house, you can't get the girlfriend. Without the girlfriend, you can't get the house. So it feels like a little bit of a circular punishment for incels there.
The fact that women who choose to be mothers are being seen as second-class rubes that have been, gazumped into taking a role that was just some ancestral old version of what womanhood was supposed to be. You can go out and be a boss bitch. You can get over your last boyfriend by getting under your next one.
Oh, no, bebe. Feminists do not see women that choose to have children as second-class rubes. You do. We say that women that have children are treated like second-class rubes because they are. In this segment so far, I've seen bioessentialism. You see women as nothing but walking wombs. You mocked a woman's career and social life. You shamed women for the casual sex you think they're having. So, tell me again, who is it that sees women as second-class citizens? Because it sure as fuck ain't me.
All of this sort of rhetoric to me doesn't sound massively empowering. Louise Perry's book, Case Against the Sexual Revolution, is phenomenal at this. Loveless sex is not empowering, and teaching women that they should be able to try and compete with men on having loveless sex. Only one gender is going to win that, right? It's not going to be the women. Men are going to continue to run through girls when they can and
run through? Did you hear that?
Leave them behind. And I don't know, I just feel like there needs to be the pushback or the swing back against past disadvantages that women have had is not making women's lives any better.
How about you let us be the judge of that and shut the fuck up?
I think that you can comfortably say that enabling women to earn more in the workplace was fantastic. The vote, the pill, the washing machine, all of this stuff, things that genuinely liberated women from the previous constraints that they had were worthy. I struggle to see how encouraging women to see the new pair of Gucci shoes that they've got, that they buy from a job that they hate to impress people that they don't like.
Oh, there were a lot of assumptions in there. You're assuming that all women don't like their job? Most people don't like their jobs because late-stage capitalism sucks. And you're assuming that every woman's spending habits are like what you see when you're scrolling through Instagram. When you look at pictures of all those OF models, you're probably following. You assume that every woman is like an OF model. And again, no shade to SWs, but a lot of assumptions in there, buddy. A lot of assumptions.
As being the highest point of contribution of their life, and that the mothers are somehow second-class citizens.
Yeah, and it certainly is. It almost seems like a concerted war on motherhood.
Oh yeah, there is a war on motherhood, but feminists didn't start it. Conservative assholes like you started it. You're the ones that are perfectly fine with letting women bleed to death in parking lots when they're having miscarriages. I want to draw your attention to something else he said.
But I was glad that she did at least highlight the idea of buying a house on a single income, because that's something I always highlight for incels, that's a double whammy kind of circular punishment. It's hard to get a house if you're a single man on one income, and a lot of incels are on lower income or no income at all. You almost need to be part of a dual earning household to get a mortgage. So without the house, you can't get the girlfriend. Without the girlfriend, you can't get the house. So it feels like a little bit of a circular punishment for incels there.
A circular punishment? The Manosphere frames not having a girlfriend or a wife as a punishment. The only way you could think that you're being punished is if you feel that you have been denied something that you were entitled to. He also said that women being the primary breadwinner makes them masculinized. He has no issue with women building wealth, But then he blames them when they do it and their marriage breaks up because your chances for divorce increase the more financially successful you are as a woman. He leans heavily into gender roles and he regularly blames women for men's behavior, which is typical of these guys. You say toxic masculinity is bad, but you haven't given men an alternative, so you can't claim to be a middle-of-the-road, neutral online voice when you say things like that. Professor Scott Galloway. This guy has been making the rounds in legacy media spaces for the last few years. You might have seen him on CNN, The View, or MSNBC. This guy is especially problematic because, like some of the people I've mentioned earlier, he can maintain the illusion of credibility, but still peddle the same tired sexist ideas. Professor Galloway traffics in so much casual misogyny, it's ridiculous. He's usually invited as a guest or contributor to talk about the so-called male loneliness epidemic. Personally, I think the male loneliness epidemic is a scam. It's not an epidemic. It's just the inevitable fallout of a system that teaches men to devalue emotional connection and to treat relationships like transactions. Men aren't lonely because women got jobs or rights. They're lonely because patriarchy taught them that domination is more important than intimacy, that their masculinity is more important than their happiness, that their feelings are more important than women's lives. The veil over women's eyes has been lifted, and we finally figured out that for the last 50 years, y'all were just playing along with this whole women's liberation thing. You never really liked us. You never respected us. And if you can't see women as people, if you don't like or respect women, you cannot love them. And now that women are financially independent, we don't have to spend our life with someone who hates us. The one person out of all the people in the world that's the most likely to kill us. And the reason the men are sad and lonely is because they have lost the access to women that they always thought they would have, that they took for granted. A paycheck and a pulse aren't enough anymore. Women want a partner who treats them like a human being. If you're not doing your share of domestic labor, emotional labor, not being an involved parent, and expecting women to take care of you as though you are a child, you are a liability. More and more women are realizing that most heterosexual relationships are a net negative for us. Men will take so much more from you than they will ever give you. When men decide to become fully functioning, self-actualized adults, maybe we can talk. But until then, I don't know what to tell you guys. It's not women's job to help you feel like a man. Instead of worrying about being emasculated by her college degree and her mortgage, what you should be asking yourself is, why the hell is my masculinity so fragile to begin with? Calling it a male loneliness epidemic or a mating crisis or a gender war is just a way to shift blame away from the system that isolated men to begin with and on to the women who are just trying to survive it. This is about the slow erosion of men's unchecked entitlement. But back to Scott Galloway. He was a guest on Diary of a CEO in March of 2025, and wow. Here's a clip from that episode that went viral, along with some comments from my good friend, the YV Edit.
A man of average attractiveness has to swipe right 200 times to get one coffee, and then 4 of those 5 coffees will ghost him.
So I want y'all to notice, we're stopping here for 2 different reasons, but the first one I want you to notice is that this man, who is seemingly like educated and well-spoken and everything, can't help but to give himself away as well as the exact type of incel that he's talking about. Because how are you going to say an average man has to swipe 200 times just to get a coffee? First of all, it's not a coffee, it's a date with a woman, a human being. The way that you're going to expect a woman to show up to a coffee date, even if you pay for her coffee, it's a negative investment to her.
He can't help but give himself away as the exact type of incel he's talking about. Truer words were never spoken. He's commodifying and gamifying dating just like the Manosphere does. And it makes sense that he would believe this stuff because, once again, this is a man who has 0 credentials in this area. No background in feminism, sociology, psychology, history. He's a marketing professor at NYU School of Business who freely admits that he was a C student in college. He admits that if he was applying to colleges now, he would not get in because he went at a time when the acceptance rate was 75%.
You can't tell women to lower their expectations, but this is the reality. when you ask a man if you could have a woman who had 80% of everything you wanted, 75% say, yeah, I'm on board. When you say to a woman, a man has 80% of what you want, 75% say that's not enough.
I'm not saying women should settle. Then what are you saying? Not to mention the man in the video answers his own question in the very same snippet.
One coffee. Now, what does that tell that guy? Women don't value me. Women make me feel rejected. And then they go online and they see these misogynists telling them it's not your fault. And these men become much more prone to misogynistic content, much more prone to nationalistic content, blaming other people for the lack of economic opportunity. They start sequestering from society. I worry that we are literally evolving a new species of asexual, asocial male. And if a man by the age of 30 hasn't either lived with someone or married someone, there's a 1 in 3 chance he's going to have a substance abuse problem.
He says that men who experience this rejection or this devaluing from women, very next thing they do is turn to incel-led misogynistic online forums because those are the only people that are able to tell these men it's not your fault. This man's big argument is that, oh, these poor men are out here thinking women don't value me, women don't value me. Sir, you're asking women out on a coffee date. How is that supposed to let them know that you value them? Like, what does that tell them about their value? You want people to value you, but the value you assign them is $7? Get the fuck out of here.
But even look at the media. Right. What does the media tell a woman to do? He's out. But he didn't open your door? He's not nice to his parent? Walk right out on that man. Like, it's literally every piece of media is you don't need him. You're a strong, independent woman. Pull the ripcord. You're out.
I also really hate how this man is like gaslighting women about having standards, and he's making it seem like women are really overreacting to these things. What sucks is that typically those men do go on to abuse and manipulate women in those relationships. I don't see the point in gaslighting women about this. That's really messed up, actually. Men pose a very real danger to us. If these men weren't already thinking like this, then red pill rhetoric would not appeal to them at all. And why are they thinking like this? Because we as a society promote misogyny. Women have no reason to be with people who low-key don't respect them, and we women have evolved to be able to smell a loser from miles and miles away. And men cannot seem to figure any of this out because they don't value us as human beings, including the man who is talking in the stitched video. The way that he talks about women, you can tell he does not care about us or like us or respect us as human beings because he's more concerned with the men who are literally turning into asexual, amoral, hateful monsters because he feels more sorry for them than the women that they are inflicting all of this upon. And that's why they're so mad.
What is he saying? Professor Galloway's biggest concern is that there are not enough economically viable men for women to form households with. He's always looking at the issue through the lens of money, the market, capitalism. He sees everything as a market, a transaction, just like red pill men do. In 2024, he told Sean Ealing at Vox, quote, "We have to have an honest conversation around mating. Socioeconomically, men mate horizontally and down, and women mate horizontally and up." Remember the Manosphere terminology from episode 2? This is the hypergamy argument.
But men have a tendency, when they don't have a romantic relationship, to not only not have that romantic relationship, but then they have fewer friends. They go out less. They're less professionally successful. You know, if I didn't have a mate who told me we need to save for a house, I'm not sure I wouldn't have been smoking pot and drinking every night. You know, she was like, if you want to continue to have a relationship and have sex with me, you've got to get your shit together. Young men need that. They need the guardrail of a romantic interest. It's absolutely bad for women, but typically, women still are economically successful, still find places to put that love, and quite frankly, don't start killing themselves or killing others. So it's not that it's any less bad, but the knock-on effects tend to be less bad for society.
Men need the guardrails of a romantic relationship? This is a deeply disturbing argument. But this man will swear up and down in every interview that he's not blaming women for the increase in the number of dangerous men and for their turning to the red pill community. But his focus is always on women's rejection and men's decreased access to women. Saying that these things are the cause of male loneliness sets us up to blame women when they experience violence at the hands of these lonely men. Make no mistake, Scott Galloway is blaming women for the incel problem. He thinks the issue is that there are too many men that aren't in relationships with women, causing them to lose motivation to go out and get a job or to become better men. Openly admitting that the possibility availability of access to women is the primary motivating factor behind male achievement. And he either doesn't understand or doesn't care that this isn't just a problem. It is the problem. But he's on podcasts and CNN and MSNBC asking, how can we create more of the type of men that women will want to marry? That's the wrong question. The right question is, why do men require access to women to motivate them to become functional adults? And the follow-up question, how can we get men to see women as human beings instead of as things to be consumed and used to motivate their success? But no. Professor Galloway thinks that the way to deal with these misogynistic men is to just find them a job, get them out of their parents' basement, and get them a wife. Simple. The subtext here is,
I know we can't ask you to lower your standards, but if you don't, the violence will just get worse.
This is a threat. And he makes this argument on a regular basis. He doesn't want society to have to deal with these dangerous young men, these domestic terrorists in the making. So instead, he wants to shift that burden from society to individual women. To keep the country safe from dangerous men, we just need to give them a woman. And then whatever violence results, that's her problem. He can abuse her or even kill her, but he'll do that instead of shooting up a school. If the violence is confined to the home, then we don't have to deploy massive amounts of federal and community resources to deal with it. For Professor Galloway, it's perfectly fine for men to use women to regulate their emotions, as long as they're economically productive and don't commit acts of domestic terrorism. Problem solved. Do you see the issue with this argument? Scott Galloway is regularly platformed in both legacy media and in the podcast world. He is ever present. You cannot get away from him. And he's peddling the same misogynistic rhetoric as the rest of them. Richard Reeves. Richard Reeves is the founding president of the American Institute for Boys and Men. Prior to that, Reeves was a senior fellow at the Brookings Institution, where he focused on policies related to economic inequality, racial justice, social mobility, and boys and men. He's the author of the book of Boys and Men, Why the Modern Male is Struggling, Why It Matters, and What to Do About It. Now, this guy admits that men emotionally depend on women. He does not deny that. And he thinks that women gaining economic independence from men is one of the greatest achievements in history. I agree. But the problem now, says he, is that there's no script for what it means to be a man. We changed the script for women, but we didn't change it for men. We've told them what not to do, but not what to do. So the question is, how do we create a new script to teach men how to be good men? Conservatives and red pillars want to strip women's rights and go back to the past when gender roles were more defined. Men need to be more like their dad, a strong provider man, and put women back in their place, which Reeves insists he is not in favor of any of that stuff, but he thinks we are making a mistake by telling men to be more like their sister.
Right, so I think underpinning a lot of these issues that we see kind of playing out for boys and men, it's really just, there's just a gap.
Yeah.
There's a space with a question mark in it now, which used to be filled with a whole script of ways, ways to be a man, ways to be a dad, ways to be a head of household, etc. And so we've torn up those old scripts by and large in these advanced economies, which is great. But I would say that we've replaced the old script that women had. Right? So in the blink of an eye, we changed the story for women in a way that I think is profoundly positive. And how do we change the story for men? The old story, my father's story, you're going to have to do as well as you can because you're going to have to look after a family, make some money, provide, right? That's going to be your role. So we took away that story because we don't know if he's going to be a provider anymore. Right? I've certainly not been the main provider, certainly not all of the time in my relationships. And what did we replace it with? What's the new script for masculinity? What's the new set of roles? What's the new set of dues that we've got for men? I think for a lot of young men, they feel as if there are two fairly unappetizing options on the table for them. From the right, they get the message like, you should be more like your father or your grandfather. Be a real man, right? Provide, protect. But then from the left, the message they get is, you should be more like your sister. The problem with your masculinity is your masculinity, and you should be more like a woman.
First of all, I wasn't aware we were telling them that. Once again, he's asking the wrong question. What does it mean to be a man in 2025? What is a modern man's role? That's not the right question. The question we need to be asking is, why do these roles exist to begin with, and who benefits from them? Men are looking for someone to lead them out of the wilderness. They find it very unsettling to not have a structured set of rules on how to behave. Men find comfort in strict hierarchies. Remember Chris Williamson, who we discussed earlier? What he said about how men view gender and how men view gender roles is very telling. I'm not convinced that there are as many ways to be a man as there are men. There isn't just one way to be a good man, but there can't be an unlimited number of ways either. Because the problem of breaking open the expectations of being a man so much that there are none provides zero guidance for men and boys on how to behave. There have to be some limitations because you are defined by the boundaries of whatever it is you're going to do. There is no definition if the definition could be anything. Translation: without clearly defined gender roles, the world is too confusing and men don't know what to do. Gender roles are not natural. They were created to organize power. They are systems of control that assign value and responsibility based on sex, not because it makes sense, but because it serves hierarchy. Patriarchal societies need women to perform unpaid labor, raise children, housework, cook, support men emotionally. So they called that work feminine and framed it as a moral duty. At the same time, they gave men access to public life, to money and power, and they called those things masculine. These roles were never about identity or expression. They were about managing economies, managing resources, preserving private property, and keeping certain people in their place. And once these roles became institutionalized in religion, in law, in medicine, and media, they were then repackaged as tradition. Gender roles are not tradition. They're social engineering. How did women rewrite the script and redefine what it means to be a woman? We didn't. We didn't rewrite the script. We just ignored it. We refused to be defined by the boundaries that patriarchy created for us. Bit by bit, woman by woman, year by year, we tried new things, entered into new fields of study, new jobs, new industries. We built community with other women. We started telling our stories. We developed a comprehensive body of research and created an entirely new academic discipline to study these roles and expectations. Maybe you've heard of it. It's called gender studies. Gender studies is the interdisciplinary field that examines how gender shapes power, identity, culture, and institutions. It asks the questions, what is gender and who benefits from the way gender works? The right questions. It examines how patriarchy, capitalism, white supremacy, and colonialism all intersect to enforce gender roles and how those roles are policed through media, through the law, labor, and in everyday life, and how gender roles negatively impact everyone, including men. Gender studies isn't about identity. It's about unpacking power. And through this field of study, we rediscovered our history, the history that the men of the past excluded from the human story. Some of us did this while becoming wives and raising children. Some of us didn't. We didn't rewrite the script. We threw it in the garbage, set it on fire, and told girls that they could do anything. And here we are 50 years later. We didn't redefine womanhood. We expanded it. We made it limitless, which is exactly what men need to do. Men like Reeves drive me crazy because it is so frustrating to watch intelligent, sincere, accomplished, and I think well-meaning men come so close to the point and then just speed right by it. We don't need to rewrite the masculinity script. We need to burn it. I want to wrap up this episode with this. The Southern Poverty Law Center Intelligence Project is internationally known for tracking and exposing hate and extremist organizations and ideologies. Among the ideologies listed in their extremist files are incels, pickup artists, MGTOW, and MRAs. Think about that. Within the summaries of these hateful ideologies is a section called In Their Own Words, which features direct quotes from members of these groups. Among those quoted are Neil Strauss, Fresh and Fit, and Andrew Tate, along with Elliot Rodger, Scott Paul Bierle, and Alec Manassian, who we will discuss in episode 4. When we look at what happens when these ideas leap off the screen and into real life, into classrooms, into relationships, and into violent headlines. See you next time.